The Columbia River Gorge is a place of incredible beauty. Lush forests, dry grasslands, snow-covered mountains, and glacial rivers can all be found along the federally protected 80-mile National Scenic Area that borders Washington and Oregon, where the Columbia River carves through the Cascades before reaching the edge of the Portland metro area. And in many places in the gorge, especially during the summer, you'll find one other thing. People. In some places, a lot of people, with more coming every year to see all the gorge has to offer.
I mean, the gorge is really unique when you think about the range of recreational opportunities and the variety of cities and visitor experiences you can have. That variety is a huge draw.
So we get 2.1 million visitors on 80,000 acres. So if you think about that, then that gives you a little sense of the concentrated use. You compare that to some of our neighboring forests who might get 2 to 3 million visitors a year, but it's on millions of acres.
Tourism has an enormous impact. It's a huge economic driver. Right now, room tax collection is the second largest source of tax revenue for the city of Hood River. It's $1 billion economic boon to the state of Oregon. And it continues just to grow year after year.
While it's great that more and more people are getting out and enjoying the public lands we all pay for, it's causing significant congestion both on and off the trails, especially in high-use areas of the gorge, like Multnomah Falls on the Oregon side, which is the most visited natural recreation site in the Pacific Northwest, and Dog Mountain on the Washington side, which is extremely popular in the spring due to its abundance of wildflowers.
It's not enjoyable to have to get in a line of 35 people to trip up Dog Mountain. It's not much of a nature experience. You kind of feel like you're on a sidewalk walking in downtown Portland or something.
Multnomah Falls is a prime example. If you don't get there super early on a weekend day, you're not going to be able to park.
So how did we get here? What's drawing more people to the gorge? And what, if anything, can be done about the issues congestion causes? First, it's important to know what the scenic area is and why it was designated in the first place.
Around 1915, the then Secretary of Agriculture actually set aside the area and called it the Gorge Park, I believe, which basically prevented grazing and logging, and really set it aside just for scenic and recreational purposes. Even that early, people recognized the specialness of the gorge.
However, as the Portland metro area continued to grow throughout the 60s and 70s, so did the number of citizens who were concerned about industrial and residential development sprawling throughout the region. Conservation groups, like Friends of the Gorge, formed in response to that threat.
Friends of the Columbia Gorge, they were instrumental in making the scenic area happen. They lobbied, they pushed, they rallied people, they brought people out into the gorge to show them what it was, to push to protect it.
In 1986, President Ronald Reagan signed the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area Act into law, which gave the region federal protection and helped preserve its natural areas. But the legislation also called for recreational enhancement and economic development, balancing those interests, promoting the area, while also trying to protect it, can be challenging.
Well, be careful what you ask for. I mean, it's protected, and it's beautiful, and it's bringing more and more people here. It's a double-edged sword when you get more people coming and you're still trying to protect natural resources.
We're beginning to see trails develop, and actually people out there actually constructing trails without us being able to do some proper planning, and many times these trails are located in a bad location, they're not sustainable, they cause erosion.
One of the iconic trailheads, Oneonta Falls, I've seen a picture with probably 200 people in the frame trying to get through just this log jam. it's unsafe and it starts getting unsanitary.
We have found some areas that we used to promote say 5 years ago, and now we don't even talk about them because they've gotten overpopulated, overused. Tamanawas Falls, for instance, we did a great job of getting the word out about that, and it got picked up on USA Today as one of the best hikes in America, and now it's overrun. Oneonta Falls, same thing. We used to mention that, now we don't mention it at all in any of our promotional materials or our press releases because it's getting loved to death.
The Chamber of Commerce isn't the only one to change their tactics on what areas to highlight or how to promote the gorge. Hood River resident Scott Cook, author of the popular Curious Gorge guidebook series, has also changed his approach.
Like, I don't even have to prepare you for the adventure anymore. The adventure is just beware, you might not be able to park within 2 miles of it. And it's a ton of people. And so I started to make these little warning buttons in the new guide that said, warning, weekend crowding, or every single day crowding. And that was never the case, 10 years ago that I would ever consider I'd have to warn people. There was nobody at anything. And I figure if I put on enough obscure places in a whole book, very few of them would get overwhelmed.
Arguably, the biggest promoters of hiking and recreation areas are no longer tourism agencies or guidebook authors. It's us. Social media and smartphones have undoubtedly had a huge impact on visitation in the past several years. With geotagged photos and mapping apps, it's easier than ever before to find these places and to get to them. It's convenient for all of us, but that shift creates its own set of problems.
A smartphone is a guidebook now. It has all the maps in it, it has all the driving directions, and the driving directions, all you have to do is say Google Tamanawas Falls, and you've got driving directions to get somewhere, and you also have a litany of images of Tamanawas, and that's all it takes for people to get to these hot button places. Whether they're prepared for what they're going to find there, or have an expectation of it, or know what to do, that's up for grabs.
Those users that tend to get themselves in trouble are the folks from the urban areas that, again, may not have the experience or understanding and awareness of being prepared, being good stewards in the gorge. They just want to get out and go, hey, let's try this hiking thing. And we heard about the gorge. Let's go to Eagle Creek. Everybody said that's a cool place.
We've only seen, I think, 2 or 3 rescues since I've been sheriff that involved somebody that was local. It's really common for 100% of our rescues to be visitor and tourist related. We have people that are calling because this county is just inundated with visitors and tourists that aren't familiar with the area and maybe aren't prepared.
18 someone. If you could take a look, call number 15. The RP doesn't need contact, just wants you aware of what's been going on.
I think about 2012 we were doing approximately 75 search and rescue calls per year, and now since 2013 we average 100. We've been in a hole staffing wise, or at least down a position or 2 for most of my tenure as sheriff. I worry about a day where we can't commit that we are providing adequate services to the tourists and visitors coming here. And that day, honestly, is not very far off.
Local search and rescue personnel encountered one of the greatest challenges they've faced during late summer 2017, when a teenage boy from Vancouver, Washington threw fireworks into the Eagle Creek Canyon, sparking a blaze that would ultimately burn nearly 49,000 acres, an area almost half the size of Portland. A huge chunk of the gorge became inaccessible to recreation, but it didn't stop people from coming.
The Eagle Creek fire pushed a lot of people over on the Washington side of the gorge too, and which was a good thing. They're exploring different trailheads, but those trails feel overwhelmed too.
Lewis River Falls, of course, is on the Gifford Pinchot, and they've seen a significant increase in use. And again, I think it's a direct result of the Oregon side of the gorge being closed. Cape Horn, we've been monitoring that, and use has increased over the last 5 years, and it's not waning at all. In fact, it probably got worse with the Eagle Creek fire.
Even before the Eagle Creek fire, stakeholders in the gorge were looking for ways to reduce congestion, but increased visitation on the Washington side kicked efforts up a notch. In the spring of 2018, the Forest Service started requiring a permit to park at the Dog Mountain trailhead on weekends, with only a limited number issued in an attempt to get more people to ride the shuttle. It was the first time a quota permit had been issued for a hike anywhere in the gorge, and it had mixed results.
Parking was greatly reduced on the weekends, and we didn't have the issues we had in the prior years, but what we saw was that it got pushed out to Monday and Friday. So they're coming at a different time now to avoid the permit. So we're having to think about how do we manage that?
Across the Columbia, congestion got so bad at Multnomah Falls that in 2014, ODOT installed gates that would close when the parking lot got too full in order to remedy traffic backups that were creating hazardous situations on Interstate 84. A couple years later, the Gorge Express Shuttle was introduced, with service to Multnomah Falls and other popular gorge destinations. Ridership has been good, with service expanding, but its effect on congestion is complicated.
The shuttle service and the transit service may have actually increased use there at Multnomah Falls, because we certainly didn't see a decrease in congestion along the historic highway. What we also realize is transit alone doesn't solve congestion.
With Portland's population and the gorge's popularity continuing to grow, tackling congestion has proven to be challenging. And since the gorge isn't a national park with an entrance to control, there's only so much that can be done. So, if there's going to be more people recreating in the gorge, one option is to make sure they know how to take care of the land and themselves. In 2017, the Trailhead Ambassador Program was developed, placing volunteers at trailheads to educate hikers about outdoor etiquette and preparedness. It quickly became clear that their services were needed.
The day I was a trailhead ambassador at the Dog Mountain Trailhead was such an eye-opener for me, because people would walk up. They had no idea how long the trail was. They had no idea how steep it was. They didn't have adequate water or food or footwear or clothing, and it's a really tough trail, but they see everything on social media and they're excited about getting out there in the flowers.
Helping the new people learn what they should be doing and shouldn't be doing and why has been extremely helpful. And I think that once people understand what they need to do and why they're doing it, most people are extremely compliant. They get it.
Stop there.
Education can change how people recreate, but it won't necessarily change recreation rates. Gorge officials are still wrestling with how to reduce congestion, recently airing ideas such as turning the Columbia Gorge Highway into a one-way and charging parking fees. And they're not the only ones. Natural areas, and particularly national parks, have also seen large increases in visitation and the associated problems that go with it. As population increases on the West Coast and in the U.S. in general, we all may simply have to get used to seeing more people on the trails.
Public property, Forest Service property, state parks property, DNR property, that's the public. Everyone has a right to be able to go there. And yes, it's everything's more crowded than it was before. Everything, not just the hiking trails. The whole world is more crowded than it used to be, and we just need to get used to that. I can remember when there was hardly anybody out on the river too, but I see all these people enjoying it, and I think that's way more important than me having my own private little spot.